Most human beings believe that their suffering is a direct consequence of the world around them. They think if only their partner were different, if only the job were better, if only society were more just, they would finally be happy. This illusion, though widespread, is the very foundation of prolonged misery. The truth is, what you experience within you does not come from the outside. It arises from how you process the outside. Two people can go through the same situation. One suffers and the other grows. The difference is not in the event, but in their inner engineering. Look closely and you will see no one has the power to make you miserable unless you give them permission. Yet unconsciously people hand over their remote control to everyone they meet. Someone says a word and you're disturbed. Someone ignores you and you're hurt. This is not life being unkind. This is you giving away your inner space to the whims of the external. If your happiness is determined by conditions, it will always be under threat. True misery begins not in the moment things go wrong, but in your resistance to what is. The mind is an incredible machine, but it has no brakes of its own. It remembers every unpleasant word spoken 10 years ago but forgets the beauty of the sunrise this morning. Misery is a replay, a repetition of pain in the mind long after the situation is over. You keep the wound alive, not because the world demands it, but because you are attached to the identity that comes from suffering. Many people unconsciously derive their sense of self from their problems. Take away their problems and they feel empty, because they have built themselves around what's broken. Emotional pain, when left unmanaged, becomes a comfort zone. It becomes a familiar pattern, a place where you know who you are, even if it hurts. That's why people carry their misery with pride, like a badge of experience. But just because something feels familiar doesn't make it healthy. You can either use your intelligence to untangle yourself from this trap or to reinforce it further. The choice is always yours. But as long as you believe the world owes you peace, you will continue to be enslaved by every unpredictable wave of life. Unhappiness is not your punishment, it is your signal. It is your signal, it's life telling you something is not aligned within. But instead of going inward, people run further outward. Into distractions, people entertainment escapes. But the source of suffering is not in the things, it is in the way you perceive them. That is why some remain peaceful in chaos, and others restless even in comfort. Until you see that misery is not something done to you, but something generated by you, real transformation remains distant. Intelligence is a powerful gift, but when it is not accompanied by awareness, it can become a curse. A knife in the hands of a skilled surgeon can heal. In the hands of the unaware, it wounds. Similarly, the human mind, when refined and sharp, can become the greatest source of joy or the deepest source of misery. Most people are not suffering because life is hard. They are suffering because their minds are sharp but misdirected. The very intelligence that could liberate them has turned inward, becoming a tool of self-destruction. Animals feel physical pain, but they do not carry psychological suffering the way humans do. If a dog loses a leg, it limps and adjusts. It doesn't sit around for years resenting its fate. But a human being will replay one painful incident for decades, modifying it, decorating it, amplifying it. Why? Because we have memory and imagination, two tools of intelligence. These tools can be miraculous if used consciously, but when used compulsively, they become weapons. You remember the hurt in high definition. You imagine the future with anxiety, and you suffer that which is not here. When you are deeply intelligent but unaware, your mind becomes a maze. You get lost in your own thoughts, chasing phantoms and fleeing shadows. You start analyzing every gesture, every word, every silence, until you are drowning in conclusions. This is not wisdom, this is paralysis. The more you think, the more tangled you become. A simple moment becomes heavy with over-analysis. Peace becomes impossible because your intelligence is not resting in presence. It is looping endlessly through scenarios that never existed. The tragedy is not that people are unintelligent. The tragedy is they don't know how to manage the intelligence they have. An overactive mind, when untrained, becomes like a loud radio you cannot turn off. It plays every song, love, fear, guilt, fantasy, whether you want to hear it or not. You try to find peace, but the music never stops. You try to sleep, but your own mind becomes your insomnia. And so, the more intelligent a person is, the more they tend to suffer, unless they learn how to guide that intelligence inward towards silence, not stimulation. A child plays, laughs, and forgets. A grown up remembers, regrets, and resents. This is not maturity, this is misuse of intelligence. Maturity is not how much you remember, it's how lightly you hold the past. It's not about thinking more, but thinking clearly and only when necessary. But the modern mind is in a state of constant activity, trying to solve problems that don't exist, trying to protect against futures that haven't arrived. In such a state, even comfort feels empty and success feels hollow. Not because life is lacking, but because the mind is turning against its own source. If you observe carefully, you'll realize that most of your suffering is not coming from what is happening right now. It is coming from what has already happened or what you fear might happen. The mind is a brilliant instrument, capable of constructing entire realities. It remembers, it imagines, it projects. But when you lose awareness, this tool becomes your trap. You are not suffering reality, you are suffering your memory and your imagination. The situation may be over, but your mind keeps it alive like a ghost haunting the present. The lion in the forest may feel fear for a few minutes when it is threatened, but the moment the threat passes, it returns to a state of calm. Humans, on the other hand, can sit in perfectly safe rooms and still be tormented by something that happened 10 years ago or something that might happen 10 years later. This is not evolution, this is misuse of intelligence. The same mind that can solve great problems and create wonderful beauty, when untrained, can manufacture endless pain from thin air. It is not the external event, but your internal replay of it that causes the suffering. You must understand, the mind is not your enemy. It is your creation. But because it runs on autopilot, without awareness, it starts functioning like an untamed animal. Thoughts arise not because you want them to, but because you have never taken charge. If your hand began moving involuntarily, you would seek medical help. But when the mind moves without your will, you think it's normal. This unconscious activity is the breeding ground of suffering. You are being taught instead of thinking consciously. This is the core of psychological misery. We constantly dwell in two non-existent places, the past and the future. We revisit wounds, rehearse failures, and then we leap into expectations and fears that haven't even materialized. The present moment, the only reality, becomes a corridor we pass through without even looking. In this way, the mind hijacks life. You don't experience what is, you experience what your mind says it is. A distorted filter replaces reality, and this distortion becomes the source of pain. If only you could sit with life as it is, without the mind's constant commentary, you would find there is very little to suffer. The most painful moments in life are often just echoes of what the mind refuses to let go of. It is not the event that lingers, but your attachment to it, your identification with it, your unwillingness to see that the moment has passed. In clinging to these mental residues, you prolong suffering beyond its natural life. The mind loves to keep stories alive because they give it a role to play, victim, hero, villain. But life is not asking you to play a role. Life is just happening. It is the mind that assigns meaning, and in doing so, often creates unnecessary agony. If someone gave you the most complex and powerful machine on the planet, wouldn't you at least take the time to understand how it works? The human system, body, mind, energy, emotion, is the most sophisticated mechanism ever created. Yet most people go through life without ever reading its user manual. They know how to operate smartphones, how to handle business deals, how to drive cars, but when it comes to managing their own thought, emotion, and inner state, they are utterly lost. This absence of self knowledge is not just a gap in education, it is the root of most human misery. When your body is sick, you run to a doctor. When your mind is disturbed, you look for distraction or blame someone else. But imagine if you had the clarity to heal from within, to tune your own instrument in a way that it always played the music of joy. Most people are not suffering their lives, they are suffering their inability to manage themselves. They are angry not because the world is cruel, but because they never learned how to hold anger without being consumed by it. They are anxious not because the future is terrifying, but because they never learned how to sit with uncertainty peacefully. From the moment you were born, you were taught how to read, how to calculate, how to compete. But who taught you how to be at ease with your own breath? Who taught you how to watch your thoughts without becoming a slave to them? Who taught you how to generate joy without needing a reason? Hmm? If this knowledge had been passed on, misery would not be the default setting of modern life. We are trying to fix the world externally, but the war, the greed, the division outside is only a reflection of what is not yet settled within. People ask, how can I be happy when there's so much wrong with the world? But tell me, has your unhappiness ever fixed anything out there? When you suffer, you don't solve, you distort. You cannot build a peaceful world with people who are restless inside. This is why inner engineering is not a luxury, it is a fundamental necessity.